Right now, there's a lot of hype around artificial intelligence solutions. In today's session, we'll go through a few ways that you can be a bit more strategic and intentional about driving value for your organization, as well as your end users in construction. So let's take a look. So to start out with, we'll go through how to navigate the hype, what to deploy, what to avoid, and then how to govern and manage it all. Last, we'll cover a brief summary on key takeaways. Let's get into it. So navigating the hype. So it's good to remember here just the amount of technical automation potential that is present in the industry today. And this graphic here, this is from a recent McKinsey and Company study that shows exactly what's going on in the industry sector. So this 39%, this is work hours requiring only non-physical capabilities. So that's the technical automation potential that we're looking at, and that's quite high. Additionally to that, we can also take a look at the practical processes as well as roles that are happening to see where the exposure is and where the biggest impact can happen, especially from a feasible standpoint. So with this graph that's shown here, again, from the same McKinsey and Company study, we see that wiring cable pulling is towards the bottom, less exposure for automation. And then invoicing and data entry, that's all the way at the top there, lots of exposure to automation. So we can take a step back and look at this and say, okay, well, it seems like the manual processes that are happening in the field, those are probably going to be quite more difficult to disrupt. And should we even be introducing AI automation there anyway? Probably not. However, when we take again a look at the data entry invoicing part of the spectrum, so that very high exposure to automation, this starts to make a lot of sense, right? So it's probably better for a computer to do some of these data entry tasks that are a bit more menial. They're, much more manual in nature. It's dealing with numbers. It's probably better for a computer than a human, so to speak. So this helps us really set the stage. And I would also mention to check out the full study for the full graphics as well as the information that goes along with this, because there's a bunch more information in there that helps navigate what is happening in terms of AI and the capabilities in the industry. So moving on, what do we actually deploy here? So we now understand, what's the opportunity, what's kind of easy to tackle with AI and automation, but what do we actually practically deploy? And a good reminder here to keep with you as you go through these processes is that all technology, big or small, it must be purposeful. And that purpose, it comes from people. So there's a reason why we come back to people, process, technology all the time, and why people is first on that list. It's because our end users, at the end of the day, our people are the ones who must get the value out of the tool for it to have an impact, for it to benefit the organization, the processes, and our clients as well. So an easy equation here to figure out exactly what it is to deploy in your organization, because this will look different for every single organization involved, right? No two companies are the same. So this equation will help you get to the answer. So we can start off, of course, with our field inputs, our people. What is actually happening in our operational processes that requires some sort of improvement, feedback, automation? We will never know until we actually ask the people involved. So this could look like a survey. It could look like going to the job site, my favorite, and sitting down and interviewing some of the end users that are actually doing the work and using these tools at the end of the day. Our next step here is to also get leadership input. So these two, you could say they could happen simultaneously, but our leadership input is just number 2 here. So we must align what the field needs and wants with where leadership sees the organization headed, right? So we need to have that vision in mind, that bigger picture, and get both of those needs out. The next step, number 3. So this is looking at our business, our company. So what does the business need? So this is also another key thing here. This can look like sitting down with department leads, with C-suite leads, whatever your team looks like, get that leadership team in there. Distinct from leadership input, this is just looking at the business and saying, okay, for the next 0 to 5 years, what are the actual business goals, right? We're in companies, they exist, to do great things, but also they must be financially operational. So how do we make the first two items here, our field input, our leadership input, actually align with what the business, the company itself needs to grow, to stay sustainable, all of those good things. And then we have our prioritization, which helps us align all the 1, 2, 3 items that have come before. So with prioritization, it will help us uncover exactly what to deploy here. So with this prioritization step, consider using something like a feasibility versus impact matrix to help understand what is easy and achievable that has a good impact, what is maybe requiring more resources but may not have as much of a big impact. So it helps filter out a lot of the noise and really surface to make it very, very identifiable what should we actually focus on. And then depending on the size of your organization and the amount of resources, pick maybe just one, maybe it's 3 if you have a lot of resources available. So 1 to 3 to tackle on what you actually deploy for the next few years. So sometimes this number can seem a little low, right? The 1 to 3, but it's really significant because you don't want to overextend. A lot of times teams go in and they realize, oh, wow, we actually didn't realize just how difficult this innovation and change management stuff is. And there's only so much that, again, your field users, your end users at the end of the day can handle. So really, really do a good job on that prioritization piece. And that should filter you down to your 1 to 3 items that you're actually going to deploy. Exciting. So one of the key things that's a little bit hidden here is that listening skills are required for success. And this isn't often thought of as part of a technical implementation, but it's extremely, extremely important. And this is some of the research that's from Prosci, where, this is citing here, projects with excellent change management are up to 7 times more likely to achieve change success. And employee engagement, again, that's that listening piece, is identified as one of the top 3 contributors to that success. So this is really key in making sure that when you go to actually deploy the solution, it's not outright rejected by the people who need to adopt it. So this is a really key step. It's very hidden in the other previous equation layers, but this should be happening throughout the entire process continuously. So that's the secret recipe to success and what to deploy there. All right, so now that we know what to deploy, there's a lot of missteps that happen with what to avoid. Sometimes we end up picking something that actually wasn't so good. So let's take a look at how to mitigate this. So shiny object syndrome, this is number 1 thing to avoid. With shiny object syndrome, one of the easiest ways to mitigate this phenomenon is to use something like a rapid assessment tool. And this can be just a basic checklist. And I promise nothing much more fancier than that. So typically this checklist, it should be involving a few different stakeholders here, right? So we have IT. Sometimes companies have this distinct risk or legal group. And of course, operational leadership should be involved as well. And what these stakeholders should do is agree on what is a baseline or a minimum go, no go for a new implementation. So an example of this is if it doesn't pass the IT security requirements, that's a no-go. If it doesn't actually provide value to, more than an X percentage of projects in the field, that could be a no-go for operations, right? And this allows the organization to be dynamic because asks will come up all the time. Project will say, hey, my owner wants to use this, or hey, we have a specific need for this. We want to deploy this. And we're going to have to react very quickly and effectively to that. So this baseline minimum requirements checklist which ultimately is a rapid assessment tool, this helps become just as dynamic as the situations that will be present in your organization. So another mitigation solution here is to take this a step further, again, if you have the time, the resources, etc., to turn this rapid assessment tool into a risk-based approval path. So what does that mean? So this means to evaluate the solution based on risk, not necessarily if it's yes, no on a checklist. So if something is just for one specific project, it's requested by the owner, it has a very limited scope of function, it's not going to integrate with any of the other tools or tech stack that's in the organization, that could be pretty low risk, right? So that could be an easy go. On the other side, let's say maybe it's something that will be tying into financial data, and that's a lot of risk, right? So that could be a no-go. So this forces the organization to really understand what the exposures are in terms of artificial intelligence and to start doing a bit more homework around this to really kind of flex that muscle about what do we understand about this new technological capability that's coming out into the market. And then just a quick note here, shiny object syndrome. I think a lot of us are familiar with it, but a quick definition here, it's just going after something because it looks really cool, not necessarily because it's going to drive strategic value. So we see this a ton, especially with artificial intelligence. There's always something new every week, every day, it feels like, and we want to just grab it and go. But we have to remember that this can turn into some dangerous situations. So we want to avoid this and use these mitigation measures to help do our homework. What else should we avoid? So anything that is ambiguous. So ambiguity in artificial intelligence solutions anywhere is a big red flag. So let's talk about that a little bit here. So first up, security. If our IT group, especially our security folks in our organization, are not feeling great about a certain solution and they can't tell how something's going to work or not work, that's a big red flag. That needs a lot more homework around it to understand and then proactively be able to anticipate some of the security risks. And this is a huge concern, right? Cybersecurity. And this is from the World Economic Forum on the global cybersecurity outlook for this year, is that ransomware gets the top concern. And AI vulnerabilities is also very high up there. So this is not a small thing, right? So this has severe implications. And if a solution, an artificial intelligence solution, cannot answer exactly how they keep your data secure, how they keep their company secure, that's a red flag. We want to avoid that. Next up is cost. So we've seen a lot of different case studies that are popping up across industries in terms of cost, which a couple of the stats are shared here. There's a good example here, or bad example here from Uber. This headline from Fortune.com, burning through their entire 2026 AI budget in 4 months. And that's leading the leadership team there to question whether or not it's even worth it in the first place. So if there's limited understanding on how the costs are going to be applied to AI usage, is that tokens? Is it a license? What exactly is the structure that you're getting into? And then what are the caps? What are the guardrails? That all must be understood before even getting anywhere close to starting to implement or to have an agreement. So this is a really, really big one. So make sure that due diligence is done, especially when looking at AI solutions, because it's going to incur some sort of big cost on the back end somewhere. And then the last one here, which highlighted here in red, is ethics by proxy. So what does that mean? So essentially that means outsourcing the ethical governance, what we're doing right as a company to an AI. And this isn't often thought about as something that is a big range of exposure, but it's coming up more and more frequently. So a case study here that's pulled from Mobley versus Workday. It's the situation of using an AI tool for hiring. So if the hiring algorithm that is in the artificial intelligence tool all of a sudden is, not doing what it should be doing, it's biased, it's very clearly having discriminatory practices, the company itself isn't necessarily off the hook for those decisions that are being made by the AI. So it's taking accountability for an AI algorithm. And this does have bigger implications than we might think initially. So, especially in terms of hiring where decisions can't be reversed or where it has long lasting implications, this is where we need to take a second or a third look at it before we go to do it. And a good rule of thumb here to follow is the Canada's Algorithmic Impact Assessment Form. So this has some really good guidelines on how to strategically go through this. It will also help identify issues related to some of these other risks as well and help make what is unclear really apparent. So it really helps you see the blind spots, especially in these cases of what to avoid and where some extra measures might be needed to de-risk some of these situations. All right, what else to avoid? So, overload, and kind of touched on this earlier, right? When we talked about what to deploy and only sticking to one, or maybe it's three if you're very well resourced in your organization. But we have to be able to say no. So, this is a power in and of itself, right? So, it's saying, hey, this really great tool, it does actually look like it has some value to us, but we're already working on these two other initiatives. And at this time, we just can't take on any more until we figure out, these two first. So this is honestly a superpower to have when it comes to technology and innovation. It really also protects your teams. Again, the people that need to find meaning and the technology, it protects those people from getting burnt out, from getting fatigued by too much tech and too fast of change management practices. So very important here to stick to your guns, remember to say no, and again, go back to the results of the equation to help guide you in that process. Okay, so getting towards the end here, how to govern this? How do we manage all of this? So, one of the things to keep in mind is that I like to say that it means always implementing. You're always implementing it. So, once you get an artificial intelligence solution in your organization, you are never able to just set it down and go. You have to always be implementing it. So, why is that? That's because AI, it's by its nature, it's using some sort of algorithm and it's evolving continuously. So that gets updates through model changes. There's also updates from the training data that's given to it. So what does that mean? That means that we have to be retraining those algorithms and we have to be monitoring constantly how well the AI solution is performing. Is it actually meeting our baseline for what we need in order to stay impactful and valuable to our end users? We have to see how that does over time. So some of the issues that happen if the team isn't constantly looking at this is that there might be drift in the model, which means things will get less accurate and less helpful. You might have bias be introduced from new training sets. And over time, if this isn't being caught and addressed for, it's going to compound. And ultimately, you're going to end up with a solution that's deployed that isn't ultimately as valuable as it should be. And that's maybe not the best investment, right? So always implementing helps protect against that. Another step here, so really this should come before even getting into any sort of implementation, but AI governance committees, right? So this is just good practice to internally have stakeholders come together and help guide the organization on where artificial intelligence should be deployed, how is it managed, what is actually a priority, and make this cross-functional, right? So we have field operations represented, of course, IT and security for our technical vulnerabilities, legal and compliance, as well as finance. And there should be a regular auditing process. So this could look like every 6 months, maybe it's every quarter. It depends, right, on the extent to which AI is deployed and implemented in the organization. And then last but not least here, just really key point here is to actually have clear numbers and indications of when something needs to be fixed. So we shouldn't just be flying by, oh, well, we feel like it's not working as well. We should actually know. So that means developing our KPIs, our key performance indicators, that tells us when something is a little out of line. So when does it actually need to be fixed? And then we need to also decide as a group which KPIs trigger certain events. So if something's really off, do we actually stop the usage of that tool? What does that mechanism look like? And again, if something is indicating, hey, we need to either pause or stop, that means there's a risk involved and it's going to impact our teams. So this mechanism is very, very important, again, with keeping our end users as well as our projects and our clients safe from some of the negative impacts of poor AI deployment. So this is covering just the essentials, but in the next session, we'll talk about how to successfully apply this in your organization in a bit more detail. So stay tuned. So in conclusion, there's a lot that we covered today, but I want to leave the group with this. AI is brilliant at some tasks, and it fails unpredictably at others. And this concept is pulling from a Harvard Business Review study here. And the concept here is the jagged frontier. So we like this diagram because it kind of shows what this concept is. So inside the frontier of AI, we can use it. Consultants who used it well, they worked faster, they produced better results, it's higher quality, and we're getting an amplification, which is great. But if we go just a little bit too far and we go outside that frontier and we're over relying on the AI, it's just kind of blindly producing stuff, we're not really checking it, the quality and outputs are actually much lower. So we get a degradation of our judgment. So this makes it really tricky, right? With when we're going through navigating all of this. So we have to be really, really focused on this judgment gap. So where do we actually use it? And then where can we identify is outside of our frontier for our organization? So I want to leave you with this in mind, which is, yes, AI can amplify our expertise. If we take it too far, we might end up outside of that frontier. So keep that in mind. So key takeaways. We talked about purposeful alignment, again, listening, getting all of the input from our field, our leadership, as well as the business priorities and reconciling that. Clear boundaries, know when to stop. So what to avoid, overload. We want to avoid shiny object syndrome, and we want to mitigate those impacts anywhere there's ambiguity as well. And then last but not least, AI means always implementing. This is a continuous function, so your organization must be prepared for that in order to make sure that the quality of the AI solution that's deployed at the beginning is maintained throughout the life cycle of that solution. So with that, thanks for your time, and hopefully this helps with being more impactful and strategic with your AI deployment.